Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for joining us. I consider myself very fortunate to be with the professor, Raul Vallarino, with Avinco. Raul is by far one of the most seasoned experts in the real estate industry. He runs the appraisal company that we recommend 100% of our clients to, which is Avinco. I've known Raul for, I don't know, 8-10 years por ahí.
Could be, yeah.
Raul, thank you for joining us today.
Good morning, and thank you for the time and for inviting me. And I want to say hello to all the people who are watching this. We were talking a few weeks back, and we said that we're living interesting times right now, and I think it's very important that we talk about this because a lot of people right now have properties they have invested or are thinking about investing, buying in different places. And it's really good to know what's going on, where should we be in a few months or years, and what's happening to the market in the last years or months. So we can talk a little bit about that. And
thank you.
If you have any questions, or we can do it like a market profile and let you know our recommendations and things that you should have in mind when investing.
That sounds fantastic, Raul. I know anybody that's watching this will appreciate your perspective. And of course, the only way to determine the future is what's happened in the past and what's happening right now. So, Raul, just to give people an idea, we get viewers from inside of Panama and also outside of Panama. Avinco, your company, is an appraisal agency that many banks trust. You know, banks, in fact, invite Raul to speak when his agents are on the street delivering appraisals. They are trusted and valued. So the first question, Raul, I think people are going to be curious about is, what is the methodology? Let's say I own an apartment in the city, vamos a decir Cangrejo. No,
okay.
I say, hey, Avinco, can you come over and do an appraisal for us? Then what happens?
Okay. Well, if the bank requires the appraisal or a client calls us, usually what we do, we try to do the inspection as soon as we can. Probably the next day. We have about 20 inspectors around the country, and it's very important to do it as soon as possible, because when somebody wants to do a transaction in a bank or wants to sell or wants to buy, this is something important to them. So we try to access as soon as possible. We do an inspection, a physical inspection of the property, and we try to have the report like 2 or 3 days after that.
Okay.
Obviously, taking all information from the public record, and also in the cases when we need to get the actual map of the land, we go to a nati and get that. Okay. In appraisal, and this is part of the answer, is that by international valuation regulations, there are 3 methods usually used. The cost method or construction method is what the construction and the land is worth. Okay, that's one of the methods and one value of the appraisal. The second one, you have the comparative method. When you compare that property, if you can get properties that have been sold that are the same, with the same meters, the same finishes, in the same area, and especially if you can find one in the same building, that would be great. If not, you have to open that compass, but that's the comparative method. And it's very important when you are comparing, you should compare apples to apples.
Definitely. Ay, se cayó. There, he's back. You were saying compare apples to apples. So in the comparative method, Raul, if I could interrupt, and I don't know if you can hear me okay, your internet's going in and out. When you talk about finding closed sales, finding something similar, ideally in the whole building, does Avinco actually go into the public registry and look at the finca numbers, or do you refer to a database that you have of, how do you get that info? Chuleta, now I can't hear you at all, buddy. No se escucha. Maybe it's on my end. Keep talking. Okay, va. No. Oh, shucks. Let's see. You want to try to log out and hop back in? Or if you need to turn off your computer. So, guys, while we're waiting for Raul to get set back up, appraising is, how can I say this? Is a challenge in Panama because we don't have a robust way of searching the public registry for comparable sales. You can't just put in your apartment number like a Zillow or a Trulia or any other public registry in the United States, in Europe. All right, let's see if we can get Raul back here. He is the guy. A ver. Ahora sí. Todavía. Shucks. Let's see. I don't know what happened there. Did I turn off your phone? No. Yeah. Shucks, Raul. Let's see. And it was working just fine. I assume everybody else cannot hear Raul. Raul, say something. Check, check. I can read your lips. You're saying, how are you, everybody? It's just me. It'll be a little bit more challenging to interview by reading your lips. But if people are, if they can hear you, shucks, not sure. Correct.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes. Now we're cooking with gas. Fantastic.
Right.
Okay, so back to the comparative method of finding comparable properties, Raul.
Yes, that's very important. Okay, when you're looking at properties, it's very important to compare, as I said, apple to apples. Okay, for example, in the same building, you can have apartments for, let's say, 100 meters, and in the same buildings, you can have apartments of 300 meters. Okay,
right?
They will not have the same value per square meter. Also, in the same building, you can have an apartment in the first floor and you can have an apartment in the 50th floor. They will not have the same values. Okay. And also in the same building, you can have apartments looking at the ocean and some apartments looking to the city.
Sure.
They will not have the same value. So it's very important to compare apples to apples. If you can get a comparable, for example, in the same building, but it has different views or different square meters, you have to do adjustments. For example, if you're comparing a house with a pool, and you're doing an appraisal of a house with no pool, you have to do an adjustment. So that's very important to be able and to know how to do the adjustments to be right in the comparable values. Okay.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second, Raul?
Sure,
because what you said about the floors is really interesting, and I would love to hear your special formula. So if I'm on the 10th floor, I've got the exact same apartment, no improvements, same views, same orientation.
Yes.
And then let's say there is a similar property 40 stories above me, right? So 10th floor versus the 50th floor, 40 stories difference. Do you guys use a specific percentage or an increment like $1,000 a floor? How do you determine that?
Okay, that's a very good question. In the primary market, in the new properties, usually developers, what they used to do is exactly what you said. They would adjust $1,000 or $2,000 or even $5,000 per floor, just a number. Okay, and that in Spanish is called derecho de vista. It's the right of the view or something like that. Okay,
sure.
And that's what they use as an argument to say, if I'm gonna sell you in the 50th floor, it's gonna be higher than the one in the 10th floor. floor. One
Right.
promoter used and said a few years back that they would sell all the apartments for the same price. That was a marketing strategy.
Huh.
And what happened is that people ran to buy all the highest floors because they thought or they knew that they were buying the better properties at the same value. So that was his marketing strategy, and they usually had a lot of people run about the highest floors, and they already complied with the bank, so they could start the construction. Okay, and the third method is the income method, when you check how much that property makes. Even if the property is not rented, we can calculate how much it should receive. Doesn't matter if it's industrial, commercial, or residential. There's always a formula to see how much it produces or should produce, and that will give you a third value. So you have one value that tells you how much the construction and the land is worth. The second value is the comparative value, and the third one is the income method value. So all three will give you a final conclusion of the market value, which is what we say is what the property is worth right now in the market. Yes.
So how heavily is a bank going to weigh that third number, the value based on income? Because I think you and I would both agree, and most people following this market in the last 4 months, that rental prices have come down. So yeah, I mean, how will that affect specifically that third calculation? How do banks look at that?
Yes, you're right. The rental values have come down, and usually that takes down also the property value, because most people invest and they want return. So if the rent goes down, the value of the property will go down because people will offer less. Usually the banks they always look at the income of the property, or what they would rent it for, especially in commercial. When they are looking at commercial, to the bank, it's very important to know how much the property can receive.
Right.
And usually, yes, they call it fuente repago, or repayment source. And that's one of the parts they look at. And in commercial, I would say it is very important. And that's something that the banks look. In residential, I would say the comparative method would be the most accurate, if you're going to put weight in all the three methods. And probably industrial, you would go more to a cost method or construction method.
Okay, like a replacement cost.
Yes, a replacement cost, because usually you be, for example, warehouses, or invest a lot of money in something that you can probably won't receive a big income, but to that company it's very important to have that. And right now, when we're living, a lot of people are moving to e-commerce, and for example, pharmacies, distributors, supermarkets are finding the way to sell by e-commerce. So they will need more space. Think of Amazon.
Sure.
People will
warehouse
go
space.
Warehouse space, exactly.
Are you seeing
in those markets? Yes.
Yeah. Are you seeing, because guys, if you're just now joining us, Raul is with Avinco, which is one of the most respected appraisal agencies in the country. Raul works with hundreds of real estate agents like us, hundreds of clients that own all kinds of different properties. So Raul, over these last 4 months, I think, you would be in a good position to share your opinion as reality, as far as where are you getting the most calls from? What kinds of properties are actually getting appraised right now? Are you seeing an uptick in, say, the logistical, industrial storage side, or?
Yes. I would say we're doing appraisals in different things. We did hidroelectrica like 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
Because because they have, for example, bonds, and they have to renew the appraisal. We are doing residential, commercial, But I would say we have seen in the last 3 or 4 weeks are people looking for land to invest in agriculture, because that market didn't stop. And I think people are realizing that if you invest in food, or developing, I don't know, or even like cows or pigs, or um, like I don't know, people are doing avocados or pineapples, things like that. And also in logistics, a lot of people are looking for the cheapest, obviously the cheapest places they can afford in the best places, so the logistics would work. Yes.
Interesting. So those two particular sectors have been the biggest. You said the last few weeks, but I guess then we could extend that to the whole quarantena for the last few months. You're saying,
Yes.
maybe not. Yeah. So farmland, which is interesting because, we were talking about farmland a couple weeks ago, and then logistics facilities. Logistics facilities, is that mostly around the airport, or is that around free trade zones up in Colón? Like,
There's people that look for properties close, for example, to the airport for cargo. There's people that look for properties close to the ports, because they receive a lot of chips. There's people, for example, that look for land between Zona Libre in Colón and the Panama City. For example, cars. They usually stock cars in those areas because it's easy to have it in the midway between Colón and Panama. So it
sure,
depends on the
Chilibre.
market and the logistics. Yes.
Okay. Now, were most of those calls, Raul, for people just trying to figure out what their property is worth? Or do you feel like those were based on transactions that felt like or do you have a way to know that?
Right now, and that's a good question. Right now, we're dealing with values pre-COVID or pre-quarantena. Okay, because in the last 3 or 4 months, there haven't been many transactions done or registered in the public record. For a month or two, there were no transactions. The market, I would say, 2 months ago started moving, and I would say a month ago it started moving a lot more. So we should be
Agreed.
getting new and real data in the next few weeks and months that will tell us how the market behaves. But most people, and I think this is something that should calm down a little bit more, because the rent is going down. Most people are asking, if you're renting even residential or commercial, most people are asking to adjust that rent. And I would say some people, especially in commercial, won't be needing as much space as they used to, because they're doing teletrabajo. So I've heard a few theories about that, and some are interesting. Some people say companies will keep their space because now you need more social distancing. So you will need more space for less people.
Sure.
That's a good theory. And also, people say that right now, apartments with big balconies, for example, will be selling better, because during the quarantena, the most of the time, if you have a balcony, that's where usually you would spend the time of the day. So we have to see how the market behaves, and those
Yeah.
theories are very interesting. So yes, I would say the prices should keep going down, especially for the rent. Uh, and right now, you have a lot of people not receiving the same salaries, uh, or not receiving salaries at all. Companies are not having the same revenues as they used to have. The projections, I would say, 99% of companies, if they said they had a projection for this year, they won't comply with that. A lot of people, for example, part of their salaries was uh, based on if they sold, or they had goals to achieve, but I don't think they will be able to do that.
Sure.
So it's going to be very interesting
Yeah,
in the
it
next few
is,
months.
and I think different parts of the world are dealing with this differently, different governments, et cetera. So we've got a couple questions, and like to address those. So Chris just recently asked, you know, what happened in 2008 during the financial crisis? Do you see any similarities,
Okay.
or see some, you know, reasons for optimism based on how Panama reacted to that last crisis?
Very good question. Very good question. The economy. Okay, let's take 2015 as the highest point in value of properties in the market, and that's re, very close related to how the PIB will grow. Uh, so I would say in 2008 there was the curve would go down, but it wasn't. We didn't see a market crash. One of the things that happened in Panama is that the banks previous to that, they put a top financing price based on a value per square meter. Okay, what most banks said is that it didn't matter if you wanted to buy a $3,000 apartment per square meter, they would only finance 1,500 per square meter. So what happened is that they cost most people, if they wanted to invest in very high price properties, they would have to put the difference in cash. So most
Sure.
of the loans of the mortgages were well covered, and that was one of
Right.
the main reasons why the market, thinking about real estate market, didn't have that crash that we have seen since 2015. 2015 being the highest point, I would say between the year and today, we can probably say, and this is based general, not specifically to any area, but between 20%, 15 to 20% lower value in properties. Okay, and nobody knows what the future will bring, but you have to think that that property value should decrease in the next months, probably 5 to 10% more. Okay,
That's your thought,
and
huh? 5 to
when I
10%.
say general, yes, usually you have, for example, in the beach area, unfortunately, most properties suffer more of that adjustments, but it happened to all the market in general.
Yeah, yeah. No, well, that's definitely the $1 million answer, is to the question I think a lot of people are curious about, is what do you see prices happening in the next, you know, 6 months or so? And you said expect decreases between 5 and 10%. What about construction costs? Actually, let's answer Steve Purdum's question. So he asked, let's see if I can show this. Oh yeah, cool. What decreases, Raul, have you seen in rents approximately? And have you seen an increase in desire for houses, like you mentioned? Yeah. So what can you say to that?
Okay.
Thanks for your question.
Yes, decreasing rents, I would say, for example, commercial in a plaza in Costa del Este. Let's put that example. In the ground floor, they in the best times they would, for example, rent at $40 per square meter.
Yeah,
Right now, I
sure.
would say if they can rent it for $25 a square meter, that would be great. The big malls, for example, Arbuk Mall, they would rent up to $60, $70 per square meter. Right now, probably it's 35 in the ground floor in the best areas. Residential
Wow.
in an apartment, I would say I saw up to 18, $20 per square meter. That the best ones, it was around 13, 15, most of them. And I would say today it should be around $8 to $9 per square meter
Okay.
in
That's
monthly
significant.
rent. That's around where it should be right now. I mean, this is general. It depends on the building, the location, finishes, etc. The
Sure.
houses, most of what I've seen in the houses movement is there are when multinational companies come to Panama, they usually look for good properties for their executives. So that's usually what moves the market. Panama Pacifico, for example, they have been selling houses and for in Costa del Este, Santa Maria. It really depends on what people are looking for. There are many, many options in Panama. I don't know
Oh
if I
yeah,
answered the question.
definitely. Yeah, I think you did. But specifically, have you seen an increase in people asking for appraisals on houses, which would imply that they're in the process of being sold?
Not many, but yesterday, for example, I got a call from a client asking for an appraisal. And what he said is that he plans to sell and he wants the appraisal now because he knows that it should decrease in the next months. So he wanted the
Vivo.
appraisal done right now because, as I said, we have the data from pre-COVID. So if we use those values right now, that should be helpful for him for the property value. But he knows he
Sure.
won't sell the house as fast as he would have sold it 3 or 4 years ago, and not at the value that he would have sold it 3 or 4 years ago.
So let's make some neighborhood predictions here.
Mhm.
We've got, Panama Equity. We specialize in sort of the downtown and suburbs. So let's call it these 4 areas. I'm curious which you think will do best and worst. We've got, and based on where they're at in whatever cycle you think is most appropriate. So we've got Costa del Este, Punta Pacifica, El Cangrejo, and Balboa Avenue.
Yes.
Now we're in December or January of next year, 2021. Which of those 4 neighborhoods do you think the price will have corrected the most?
I would say probably Avenida Balboa, which had the highest cost per square meter, and they had a few projects. What happened in Avenida Balboa, it happened in most places, is that they had a few projects that were successful, and then everybody started building in Avenida Balboa.
Sure.
I know a lot of people that paid up to 7,000 per square meter of land. And right now, they would probably get, I don't know, 3,000 or 2,000 per square meter of land. So that tells you that the market was looking at that area, and they had the highest prices. Costa del Este, and I can send you some information that I gather, is that Costa del Este had two effects. One positive, I would say, the positive effect is that they have many multinational companies based in Costa del Este, and usually people look for properties close to where they work. But they also had the Santa Maria effect a few years back, that a lot of people that lived in Costa del Este went to Santa Maria, and what caused is that, for example, in Costa del Este, where you used to have one house for sale, then you started seeing 3, 4, 5, and now you see 8 in the same place for sale. So El Cangrejo, I would say, it has adjusted, but not as much. And what was the 4th area?
Punta Pacifica.
Punta Pacifica, it adjusted, but Punta Pacifica also has a special market. For example, a lot of the Jewish community, they buy in Punta Pacifica.
Sure.
So that's the factor that you have to take in consideration, because they usually buy close to the synagogues in Paitilla or Punta Pacifica. And that's something that helps that market not to adjust as much as the other areas.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, well, no, that's great observation. So, guys, if you're just now joining us, and to summarize so far what Raul shared to the last question, which was awesome. So, comparing 4 neighborhoods: Costa del Este, Balboa Avenue, Punta Pacifica, and El Cangrejo. What's going to happen in 6 months? Your thought is that in 6 months from now, prices will be similar or will not be as hard hit in areas like maybe 5, maybe 10% if it happens like that. Cangrejo and Punta Pacifica. Costa del Este could be interesting because of all the multinationals, although there is a lot of houses for sale, the Santa Maria effect, creating some competition as well. But Balboa Avenue, because there was a lot of construction and perhaps some. So if you were looking for a hot deal right now on Balboa Avenue, one that you knew let's say a newer building, like, I don't know. Well, I mean, Ricardo mentioned Destiny, which I believe is 2009. So that's 11 years old, which is still kind of new for Panama standards. So yeah, building that's about 10 years old, Balboa Avenue, oceanfront, mid to high floor, 20th floor, 25th floor. What do you think is ganga pricing? What is the kind of price that you can pay right now that a bank will give you 70% financing, right? So you got your loan to value covered. And B, in 3 years or maybe even 2 years, you're going to say, hey, I timed the market perfectly.
Okay.
What's the magic?
Well, when you say ganga, that's a word that depends on who's saying it, because some people, the ganga to them is like buying it at 50% value, and some people would say buying at 80% value would be a ganga. Avenida Balboa, I would say, I'm thinking apartments went up to $3,500 a square meter, some even higher than that, and that depends on the size and if it had ocean front view.
Right, 100 meters.
I would say right now would be probably around $1,900, $2,000 a square meter. That would be market value.
Market value.
Yes. Depends on the building. There are many different buildings, and you have ones close to Paitilla and ones far from Paitilla. For example, you have Miramar, which is located in the middle, and it's close to the sea. But when you say ganga, I would say if you see something at 1,500, 1,600, 1,600 per square meter, that would, I think right now would be a ganga.
Super ganga.
Should keep going down, and most banks, I would say, should feel okay lending you, I don't know, 70, 80, 90% of that value.
Got it. Yeah.
But for some people, ganga would be, I don't know, $1,200 per square meter. So when I say ganga, right now, what we have to understand is that we are at a buyer's market. Okay?
Sure.
Right now, usually buyers are putting the value. So, and a few years back, people would get calls, for example, for a house. They would say, okay, I'm selling, and would get calls, and they would get offended if the offer was too low. Okay, that has changed.
Yeah.
Right now, people listen to every offer that comes because they don't know what's going to happen.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's very good insight from somebody that's in the battle. So a bank-related question. Thank you, Ted. Raul, I don't know if you see this here. Ted asked, are banks loaning money to buy land right now? And what about the interino for construction loans? I have an answer on that, but I'd love to hear yours as well.
Okay. Okay. I'll start with the interinos. What happened in the few years?
Which interino? Sorry, for people that don't speak Spanish, that's a construction loan, a development loan. Go ahead.
Yes, it's a construction loan. The banks a few years back, they assigned a lot of money to interinos, to construction loans, because construction was booming.
Sure.
And they were not as strict with the preconditions. Okay, what happened when construction started going down is that the bank went up to asking, for example, 50% of pre-sales, and even 2 or 3 years ago, that's something very difficult to achieve, because the bank said, okay, if you cannot pre-sale 50% of a project, I won't lend you money to start, even to start. What used to be probably 20%, 15% of pre-sale. The rates went up, the preconditions were more strict, so that has changed. I would say the banks, the bank business is to keep lending money. So I would say the construction loans will continue, but as a bank, I don't know the policies, but they will probably be more strict when lending money for construction loans. Okay. The mortgage part of the loans, I would say, should also they will also look more strict at the what they will ask when loaning money or lending money, especially how, and as I mentioned before, how your situation has changed. If you have been in for example, if you work in a supermarket, if you're the general manager of a supermarket and the supermarket never closed, they're probably selling more, they will get benefits to the bank. That's probably a client that will lend or the same as they would lend before the COVID. But if you're an architect, for example, and you have been out of work for the last 4 months, and your income has changed, construction has gone down, that would probably be something that the bank will take into consideration when looking at that loan. Yes.
Got it. Yeah. I mean, obviously the loan profile of the general public is getting less attractive as you lose your job or, you start to get late on your mortgage. But are you still finding banks loaning on just land? Do you have any experience in that?
Most banks will lend you for land depending on where it's located. A lot of banks will not lend in the interior, for example, won't lend you in many agricultural areas, but some banks, for example, will lend you in Pedasí to buy a land in a project in Pedasí or in an Arraijan. Depends on what you're going to do with land.
That's interesting. You mentioned Pedasí. That's where Ted lives. Okay. Any particular bank that you've heard that is lending in Pedasí? So we can knock on the door.
We have done a lot of appraisals in Pedasí.
Mira, okay.
So
good
most
news.
Banks, again, it depends on the profile of the client, but most banks I've seen, banks that usually do mortgages, they lend in Pedasí. Yes, I don't know if that's going to change. I really don't know the policies. Yes.
Yeah, hopefully not. So Steve Purdom asked another question. He's on fire today. Thank you. So COVID-19 is spread in more densely packed areas in Panama. Do you see a move to less density or greater city spread in the coming years?
That's a very good question I haven't thought of because, as I said, usually the market is the one that tells you how it's going to move. And for example, if you have a project in an area that has something that people like, usually prices will go up and people will go into that area. I wouldn't know how to answer that. I mean, the market has to tell.
That's
a very interesting question.
That's the tricky part right now. It's like we're not really operating in a full unrestricted market because there are people that would love to sell and would love to buy that would just can't leave their house, right? Or cannot come to Panama. So I think we'll get a lot better sense in the next, say, 2 to 3 months as travel restrictions ease. What I can tell you is, Stephen, is that, our city office is showing a lot of houses these days up in Ancon, Costa del Este, Santa Maria, apartments with big balconies, Cangrejo, Dos Mares, those kind of areas, just like Raul said. And of course, places like Pedasí, people are just dying to get to so they could get out of the city, right? So they can have a place either full-time or part-time. So yeah, that's what's going on. Let's see here. So development in other areas will slow down or halt altogether. Yeah, so Gilberto made some comments as far as the development landscape. And I think you're absolutely right. I think banks are definitely starting to relook their financing, as Raul sort of alluded to earlier. I know of a few developers who have decided to put their projects on hold, might end up canceling. As a real estate guy who's always been concerned about overbuilding, I think that could be wonderful news for Panama 3 years from now, because all the projects that would have started now or 6 months ago or in 6 months might never happen. And that's great news for the market. Now, Raul, how much of those workers then, let's say I'm a developer, I decide not to build, which means I just cost the economy 20 jobs, 40 jobs on a, 30-story high rise, and that's materials, that's transport, that's taxes. How much of an impact do you think the slowing real estate market will have on the overall economy?
Well, we have to understand that construction represents a very important part of the PIB of Panama, and that area has been going down in the last few years because construction, I would say in the 2010, we saw projects. Even before that, we saw projects everywhere. We saw a lack of people to work in projects, and that changed. So we have to see what happens. As you're saying, a few developers even stopped the project that they already started, or didn't start at all because they wouldn't comply with all the requirements from the bank, or it came to a point where the project was not profitable enough for them to build it, because you're not going to do something to lose money. Also, all the permits, it takes months or years to have all the permits that you need to start a construction. But what you're saying is, it's right. If you don't have projects starting right now, that's going to help the extra offer of properties that we have right now to be covered in the next years. Because if you keep building, you will have more properties available. And those new properties are even fighting with the secondary market of people that already have a house and they want to sell it. So it's very interesting what the next months will bring for us. But I'm very positive. I would say, and as you said before, in the next, I would say probably in 6 months, the value should start going up. And that's very related to economy and what people start receiving back. Okay.
Vamos.
Yeah. Last week, 5 new multinational companies were approved to move to Panama. That should generate about 2,000 jobs, an investment about $30 million. I'm sorry, and that's good news for Panama. And I know a lot of multinational companies with headquarters, for example, in Chile, when they had their revolts there a year ago, looked at Panama, companies from Mexico, from Central America. Panama is still looked at a very safe place, very well-connected place, and that's something that we have to know how to sell, because that will every time and in the future will be more important, our location.
Absolutely. No, we're still very much relevant, and like you said, still very safe. There's still a lot of underlying factors that make us super attractive. And absolutely, we're working with one of those multinationals. They're looking to relocate 30 employees, all of whom have nice budgets for houses all around Costa del Este. So that'll be interesting. I mean, I remember when Procter & Gamble came to Panama in 2008, they bought, I think, about 1,200 families, and that bumped up prices overnight because we're such a small market. Yes. It doesn't take much to move the needle, and all these countries are having challenges. So, Raul, man, you are awesome. Thank you so much for joining us, and really appreciate everybody contributing their questions. Really grateful, Raul, for your insight.
Thank you for the time. And we enjoy this. This is our job, but I really enjoyed it. I know you do too. So if you have any questions, you can send them my email, my cell phone. We'll gladly help you with any questions or appraisals if you may need. Also, we'll send you a presentation I have about Costa del Este.
Okay.
And it has values, a little bit of history. Very interesting that I did for a seminar that we did a few days ago. But any requests or questions that you may have, we're here to help.
Wonderful. That's the kind of guy Raul is, folks. And, you know, early on, one of the reasons that people go to his company, there are a couple appraisal agencies out there, but Avinco is the big guys, and they're the big guys for the reason. What he said, we get there quickly, and that's a big deal. They execute, they get your report back. So no, yeah, just as you can see in the last 45 minutes, Raul is a true professional. Is good for Panama, and we're very grateful today, pal. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you all for hopping on.
Stay safe. Take
Ciao.
care.